Rahim. Today we are lucky enough to have with us a renowned personality who has worked so much for in the field of education and in other areas in Acadian as well as in Jamaati institutions. So before going to ask that personality about the roles he has played in different institutions, it would be better to know from him his childhood, his education and other background. Then we will proceed further. Sir, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Sadruddin Pardhan. I'll try to relate in summary my life from the time I was born until 1988, when I accepted an offer to come to Pakistan. I was born in Kenya in 1944, 17th November 1944 to be more exact. I come from a family where we were 2 sisters and 3 brothers. And I was born in a place called Kisumu, which is in western Kenya on the shores of Lake Victoria. I went to school in Kisumu, and I was fortunate to go to a very good school called Aga Khan Primary School. It was a co-educational school up to class 4. And I have very fond memories of that school. We had some marvelous teachers, and interestingly enough, I still remember the names of those teachers. And by the way, that school is also a very good school. It is still there and is performing extremely well. After class 4, I joined a government primary school. In those days in Kenya, we had separate schools for Asians, for Africans, and for Europeans. This was an Asian school. And again, I think I was very lucky. I got some very, very good teachers. And after passing my grade 7, which is which has a national exam, I moved into class 8, which in the Kenyan context is called Form 1. I was in the science group, and again I have some very fond memories of that school. I completed 4 years of secondary school and passed my O-levels. What I also enjoyed at school was playing sports. I was lucky to be selected in the cricket, football, volleyball and hockey teams. I also played quite a lot of tennis, and I was a school champion in table tennis. After my O-levels, I went to a small town called Mbale in Uganda, where I did my A-levels. I did my A-levels in mathematics, physics and chemistry. And after completing my A-levels, I worked for about 8 months before proceeding to join a university. And that was my first experience at working. I worked in a spare parts shop, and after that I worked at a gas station which was owned by an Ismaili gentleman, until such time that I went to Sweden for my first degree. Why Sweden? Well, I was going to proceed to University of Nairobi, which was an excellent university at that time. But then, as part of the human resource development policy of Kenya, I got a scholarship to study in Sweden. So I proceeded to Sweden in September of 1963. And joined the Uppsala University, where I studied mathematics, physics and chemistry. I completed my honors degree in physics and started studying for a master's degree in physics in solid state physics. Before completing my master's in physics, I got an offer to join the Department of Physical Chemistry, where the professor encouraged me to get into a group so that I could study through to my PhD. So I did that, and I got credits for all the courses that I've done in physics. I first did an honors degree in chemistry, then I completed my master's in chemistry in an area called fast reactions, studied through flash photolysis, and then completed my PhD, where I studied the characteristics of macromolecules in solutions. I also studied biochemistry as my minor. I completed my PhD in 1969 and then went back to Kenya and joined the Kenya Science Teachers College, which itself was a Swedish project, and I started teaching chemistry at that institution. Upon my return, I also started getting involved in Jamaati affairs, and I was a member of the youth group in Nairobi. I stayed at the Kenya Science Teachers College, and an interesting event took place in 1972 in East Africa, when Idi Amin Dada asked all the Asians in Uganda to leave. In those days, East Africa had some common services, including curriculum and examinations. So those of us who remained were asked to take over some of the key positions that were vacated by the migrating Asians and Europeans. And again, I was very fortunate. I was in the right place at the right time, and I was asked to become a chief examiner of all levels of chemistry in the country. So I was looking after A levels, O levels, and O levels, and many different aspects of chemistry. I was also involved in curriculum development. So these two together set me up for becoming an educator rather than a research worker in chemistry. At the college itself, I was promoted to become the head of the chemistry department, then head of sciences, and ultimately I ended up as a deputy principal of the Science Teachers College. In the meantime, I served on a number of Jamaati organizations. I was a member of International Committee of Tariqa Board. In those days it was still Ismailia Association. And then in late 1970s I was appointed as a director of Aga Khan Education Services, Kenya, where I served for 3 years. While I was serving there, I also became the chairman of the Parents Teacher Association of Aga Khan Primary School in Nairobi, where my son went to school. I should have mentioned that in 1969 I got married, and my wife and I have 3 children, a daughter and 2 sons, and mashallah, all 3 of them have performed well. They have completed the university education. My daughter is about to complete her PhD in education. My first son is completed his dentistry and MBA, and is practicing in Canada. And my youngest son has just completed his master's from SOAS, University of London, in international relations and diplomacy. Now, in 1981, my family and I decided to migrate to Canada, and we lived there for about 9 years. Although in essence I still live in Canada, but since 1988 December I've been in Pakistan. While in Canada, I worked in an industry during the first year, and after that I started teaching University of Alberta courses in chemistry, and did that until such time that I came to Pakistan. While in Canada, I served as a member of the Council for Edmonton, and I was also a Kamaya Saiban in one of the Majlis there. I should have mentioned that prior to migrating to Canada, I worked for 2 years with an Acadian bank, the Diamond Trust Bank in Kenya. That was between 1979 and 81. And I must say that I thoroughly enjoyed that experience, in that it is very different from being a university professor. It's the real world, and you kind of came across some amazing aspects of the commercial world, and it was thoroughly an enjoyable experience. I initially worked as a loans manager, then I shifted to become the manager of the Nairobi branch, and I was lucky that I was given the responsibility of computerizing all the accounts, which I did, and on the last day when I left for Canada, I had handed over a completely computerized a set of accounts to the Diamond Trust. In 1987, late 87, early 88, I heard an announcement for a vacancy of the executive officer of Aga Khan Education Services in Educaitonal in Canada. In fact, at that time I used to live in a small city called Red Deer, Alberta. It is located between Edmonton and Calgary. Initially I didn't apply, and when I heard the announcements repeatedly, I thought that I had the qualifications, so I could apply. I did, and in August of 1988, I was offered the job after a series of interviews, including an interview at Eglemont. And I decided to come to Pakistan in December of 1988. Okay, so that's the first part.
So you mentioned that you had your education in chemistry, and then you have also a banking experience. So was that experience, that education, in line with that? How you have managed it? It seems quite different for us.
So why don't you ask me that question and I can answer?
Yeah. You have got a different background, education background. You have got somehow educator background, chemistry background, and then you've come to bank. So how it was possible for you to manage these things?
Well, sometimes opportunities come at the right time. What happened was that when I was at the Kenya Science Teachers College, I became the head of my department, and I became head of science, and I became the deputy principal. All this exposed me to management, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. At that time, Acadian institutions were looking for human resources, and one fine day I bumped into the chairman of IPS, TPS and Diamond Trust, who asked me if I would be interested in working in what is now ACFAD, the commercial arm of AKDN. And at that time I told him I am not really interested. But he says, think about it, and if you do change your mind, come and see me. So he had planted the seed, and I thought about it, and I went through quite a tough time making a decision. And a few days later I went and saw him. And he told me about the different opportunities and the fact that they had already targeted me because I had some experience of management, and they thought that I could fit in very well in any of the three organizations, IPS, TPS, or the banking sector. So he gave me a choice, and I thought banking would be an interesting choice. So that's how I ended up in banking, and I must say I thoroughly enjoyed it, because I think what chemistry or sciences teach you is logic.
Yeah.
It teaches you how to analyze situations, and that's what happened to me, and I was able to fit in quite well. And if not for the difficult political situation in Kenya, I think I would have continued with that bank, and God knows where I would have been. One interesting thing that happened as a result of my experience in the banking field was that I really felt that I should have some background in business studies. So when I was in Canada, while I was teaching at the university, I decided to also study for a master's program in business administration, and I completed my MBA. It was one of the most exciting programs that I've participated in, and in those days I used to live in Red Deer, as I mentioned, and my classes used to be in Edmonton, which is at a distance of 154 kilometers. So 3 times a week I used to travel in the evenings to take my courses, and over a period of 3 years I was able to complete all my studies, and I was fortunate that I did not miss any class to do that. And I think I traveled an estimated 170,000 kilometers to complete my studies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's begin with Pakistani context then. But we will be also going for the childhood memory again,
Yes.
because there are some important events which are which have a very profound effect on our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So would you like to share with us some of the event which you think is very important in your childhood memory?
Oh, there are many events. Actually, I come from a not very well-to-do family. In fact, my father was almost blind, but he worked very hard. He made sure that we got very well educated. You know, life is very interesting in the sense that in 1952, my mother had to accompany my nanny, my grandmother, to go to Europe for some medical treatment. So we ended up moving back and forth to Nairobi, and then we stayed with my aunts for quite a long time. That itself had a profound impact on us, because we started understanding how to live independently. I was very young at that time, but it was quite an interesting experience. And then, of course, once she came back, life was normal. School years were very, very happy years, we got superb opportunities. Then came the O-level. Once I completed my O-levels, I had a choice. I wanted to go to a school, a very large school in Nairobi. But for some reason, I did not get a place there, which was a very big disappointment for me. So I decided to go to Uganda and complete my A-levels. This was a very major happening in my life, because had I gone to the school in Nairobi, I think my life would have evolved very differently. Anyways, I went to Uganda, and also again enjoyed my life there very much. I was very much involved with sporting activities. In fact, I was selected to play cricket for young Uganda 11, it was under 19s, and we got a chance to play against the full Uganda 11. In those days, Uganda had a very good cricket team. So that was a very interesting happening in my life. When I completed my A-levels, my original ambition was to become an engineer. But I enjoyed my sciences so much that I decided that I would go for a degree in sciences rather than engineering. Of course, my mother was a bit disappointed, but she said, whatever you like is what you should go for. And I made a decision. Although I replaced it in engineering, I decided not to go for engineering. I decided to go for sciences. So these are some of the happenings in my life which really made a big difference in what was, what was supposed to come later on in my life. One other very interesting thing happened to me. I think it was 16th of September 1963. I was just about 2 to 3 days away from going to Nairobi University when I received a telegram saying that I had won a scholarship to go to Sweden, and my flight was that evening, and I was staying in a place called Kisumu, which is 350 kilometers from Nairobi. Now I had 9 hours not only to decide whether I wanted to go to Sweden or not, but also to get to Nairobi to catch the flight. And I had the blessings of my parents that yes, it was okay to go to Sweden, so I ended up going to Nairobi. I was lucky to get a flight from Kisumu to Nairobi, and by 6 o'clock I was in Nairobi. My uncle came and picked me up at the airport, and by the way, that was the first time I had ever sat in an aircraft. And that evening at 11 p.m. I was on my way to Sweden. It happened so suddenly, and I made a decision which had a huge impact on my life. Again, had I gone to Nairobi University, I don't know how my life would have evolved. I decided to go to Sweden, and ultimately ended up doing my PhD in Sweden. So it's funny, my life has, there have been opportunities coming at critical times, and I have grabbed those opportunities. One other interesting thing that happened to me was, because I used to play cricket, I was lucky that in 1977, our club, Aga Khan Club, which was performing extremely well in the Kenya League, we were offered to come to Pakistan and India to play cricket. And that was the first time I ever came to Pakistan, and we played here in Karachi, we played in Lahore, we played in Pindi. And that was my first experience of coming to South Asia, and after that we went to India and spent overall 35 days touring India, Pakistan and India. So that was again a huge experience and a wonderful experience.
So you were talking about that you had been working with Jamaati institution from the beginning, from the Africa as well. So how that service has helped, support or hindered your career?
Jamaati service never hinders a career, in my opinion. It is something that you do because you want to do it. Actually, I think I've been involved with Jamaati service ever since I remember. Maybe I was about 6 or 7 years old when we used to go to pick ice from members of the Jamaat so that we could serve cold water to the Jamaat when they came to Jamaat Khana in the evenings. And then, of course, we were members of shoe company, and then I became a scout. I was a member of the 5th Aga Khan troop in Kisumu. And as a result of being there, I made it right up to the top level in achievements, and in those days it was called the Queen Scout level. So, I mean, that service really toughened me rather than take away anything from me. And then when I was a member of the various committees, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I worked, as I mentioned earlier on, I worked with the International Ismaili Association, and we did a lot of planning for the future of education within the Jamaat, I mean religious education. And then when I was working on a committee with Aga Khan Foundation, we developed a very interesting report on the philanthropic activities of various organizations in Kenya. We thought that it would be about 100, 200 pages, but ultimately it turned out to be 1,700 pages. Again, for me, it was a huge experience, and in fact, I learned enormously out of that. And then when I was a member of the Aga Khan Education Service in Kenya, again, it gave me a very good exposure to how the Jamaat institutions work, what kind of problems are faced by Jamaats. I was looking after schools at that time. I was chairman of the scholarship committee. I was the chairman of career guidance committee. And all these things added to the experience. So I really feel that Jamaati service never hinders. It, if anything, it really adds value to your overall growth in education.
So coming to Pakistan now, you came in December 1998.
1988.
1988, sorry. 1988. So when you came as a CEO?
Yes, I was the CEO designate of Aga Khan Education Service Pakistan, because the then CEO was still here and we were going to overlap. So I initially attended some meetings at Eglemo, and I was lucky to attend a meeting where Hazimam was present, and I was introduced to him. And immediately after those meetings, I came to Karachi and started working as a designate CEO.
Okay. So when you joined AKES, so what was the situation at that time of overall AKES, including northern area and south?
AKES, as you know, is a very large organization, and I think in those days there was a tremendous move towards the improvement of education. And in fact, one reason why I think I was selected to be the CEO of AKES was not only to look after AKES, but also to be a member of a task force which was asked by Hazrat Imam to look at how best we can improve the quality of education through teacher education programs. So for me, it was very exciting times, because AKES itself is a very live kind of a situation where we were really trying to improve the quality of education. And with 188 schools, plus all the other programs we had, it was not an easy task, but a thoroughly enjoyable task. In those days, we were still opening new schools in both northern areas and Chitral. We had the makings of something that is going to be very good, but still we had a tremendous shortage of human resources. We only had 5 or 6 very well qualified people in the northern areas, maybe 2 or 3 very well qualified people in Chitral. And we were in the process of getting our teachers in northern areas and Chitral trained. through various means. One was through the field-based teacher development program, because our women were better able to access good quality teacher education programs through field-based. We were encouraging our teachers to complete their graduation, to complete their Bachelor of Education programs, those who had already done that to complete their master's degrees. So things were on the move. The Jamaat was very, very anxious, very enthusiastic to get good quality education, and wherever there was no access, to get access of education. They were sacrificing enormously. I mean, I remember, Jamaati members donating land for self-help schools construction programs, donating money for that. Jamaat in Chitral was also sacrificing a lot, and things were absolutely amazing for me. I remember, I think this was, if I'm not mistaken, in early June of 1989, when we opened, we upgraded Danyor High School and Hussainabad High School from middle school to high school level. And why I remember the timing is because I remember we had lovely cherries at that time. Now just imagine, this was 1989, which is not very long ago that we first opened our DJ high schools. Of course, by that time, Aga Khan Academy was already there, Aga Khan School, Sherkila was already there, so our girls were getting good quality education. But access to good quality education, I think, came with the opening up of the DJ schools, and today, mashallah, we have got, I think, over 24 high schools in northern areas within the DJ system, plus we have got the school in Karimabad, in Gakuch, in Sherkila, and in Gilgit also, the boys' school. One other thing which was really striking for me when I first came was that the girls had very good opportunities. And I went to the Aga Khan Academy, and I remember Rahmat Mewawala was the principal there, and I was quite impressed with the enthusiasm of the girls and the confidence that they were showing, and I thought these girls are going to perform well in life. And likewise at Sherkila also, they were performing well. And today when I look back, I think those schools have played a tremendous role in the development of women's education in northern areas.
So you mentioned about that shortage of manpower was one of the problems. So apart from that, when we look at the infrastructure and budget and all other aspects, what were the challenges in those areas?
Oh, there were many challenges, and of course I don't know where to start, but let me try. On the one hand, we were trying to develop human resources, and that was happening through various programs. You know, we had a scholarship program where everybody from northern areas in Chitral participated. Now, everybody got something, and I think that really helped our Jamaati members to get educated. Now, I don't think that everybody got top quality education, but everybody got education. I think that was very important because they realized the value of education and value of education for their children. So that was one thing that was happening. As far as infrastructure development was concerned, we had some high profile projects like Sherkila School, Aga Khan, what was Aga Khan Academy now, the high school, Aga Khan High School in Karimabad. We then built the Buni Girls Hostel in Chitral. We built a Chitral Boys Hostel. We then built the Aga Khan High School Gakuch. We built Aga Khan Higher Secondary School in Gilgit. these are all high-profile projects. Then we had improvement of schools through the initially as a result of our Sherkila school, where Jamaati members got very enthusiastic and started building replicas of Sherkila school. Unfortunately, because they did not have support of engineers and architects, some of those structures did not work out very well. But what it proved to us was that Jamaat was very interested in self-help. So we started the self-help schools construction program in, I think, 1983. And as a result, a lot of very good quality, low maintenance schools were built across northern areas in Chitral. And while it took time for the Jamaat to participate, today, even today, the Jamaati members are still very enthusiastic, and we are still building, mashallah. So that's where the physical infrastructure became better. So we had the human resource development, physical infrastructure, and I'm proud to say that more and more children who had gone through various schools of AKES in northern areas started occupying some very senior positions across northern areas, Chitral, and in rest of Pakistan. And something that has amazed me is the enthusiasm with which the members of the Jamaat from northern areas in Chitral have taken up education in Jamaati service. It's tremendous.
So, coming to that budget aspect.
Yeah, I should talk about budget also. Budgets have always been a problem. But something interesting happened, which I think will have long-term implication for education, not only in northern areas in Chitral, but everywhere. Hazrat Imam gave us guidance that it was very important for the Jamaat to understand that good education cannot come for free. They must participate. So we started with very small fees of about 5 rupees in northern areas and 2 rupees in Chitral. And we had a lot of problems. Jamaati members just could not understand why they should pay fees when at government schools there were no fees at all. But as Imam said, no, there was not going to be any compromise on that, because the Imam cannot keep providing funding, because there were other Jamaati institutions which needed funding. There was a whole, I mean, you know, it's not only Pakistan. Across the world, there are poor Ismailis and they needed help. Then we had health services, we had other services. The whole AKESP was also expanding, and a lot of resources were being called upon. So that was the part of the operational budget. Then we were also very lucky that because as AKESP we had established a good name, we also got external funding from various agencies, and that's how we were able to develop our human resources, because we started getting scholarships. We developed physical infrastructure through grants for self-help schools construction program. So that's how we were able to manage. And mashallah, the Jamaat also was progressing economically, so much so that when in early 90s, AKES could not quite quickly introduce English language as the medium, Jamaati members opened their own English medium schools, and there the members of the Jamaat were prepared to pay fees of up to 250-300 rupees, which showed that economically the Jamaat had made a lot of progress and the signs were very good. And gradually the fees of the Diamond Jubilee schools also increased. At the premier institutions like Aga Khan Academy in Karimabad, Sherkilla, the fees were already very high, and more Jamaati members were able to pay. So I think Jamaat valued that that good quality education had to be paid for, and mashallah today they perform very well. So coming back to your question, I think budget was always a problem, but the Imam was very gracious, and while he gave us a tough time, we were always able to get money to make sure that education was provided to the members of the Jamaat in these difficult years.
So you were also mentioning that you got some AKESP got external funds. So when that started, and what effect it had on our
external funding started way back in early 80s for both self-help schools construction program and field-based teacher development program. We got external money, and the organizations that gave us funding were CEDA, the Canadian CEDA, European Commission, the Dutch government, the Norwegian government, and Aga Khan Foundation played a very important role in harnessing this funding. So they negotiated these funds for AKES, like they negotiate for other organizations also. So that's how the funding started coming in, and we have been very lucky at AKES and within AKES that right until this year we have had some amazing funding for education.
Okay. As you mentioned that the Jamaat had started English medium schools in the northern areas, and AKES had not started it. So what were the major problems at that time?
The biggest problem was to find teachers who could teach English. I mean, there was no way we could start without teachers, because we were just going to create a chaos. But after a lot of pressure came to bear on us, I remember in those days, Aga Khan, Sadruddin and I used to meet quite a lot. And we decided to conduct special training programs for teaching of English at class 1. We did not want to go across the board. We started in class 1 in 1992. And we were very hesitant, but it worked. Children were good, and the teachers learned, and I think children learned faster than the teachers. So we decided that we had to have a long-term program to develop as many teachers as is possible. And that's how we started the language enhancement and what was called LEAP, language enhancement and achievement program, yeah. And that played a huge role. So suddenly, DJ schools were now also giving a lot of importance to English, and the impact is being felt now that we have a lot more people who can speak English than in other parts of the country.
Okay. So when that Urdu medium schools were converted into English, in the course of that action, what sort of challenges were there?
No, there were many challenges. I don't say that Urdu medium schools are totally changed. I think we still have a strong element of Urdu in our schools, and I think rightly so. I think it's very important to have Urdu also. But there are many challenges. One was, of course, I mentioned earlier, we did not have teachers. So we had to train teachers. Now, some of the teachers had enormous difficulties in learning English. Second was, we did not have enough materials. In order to teach through English medium, you need a lot of materials, so that had to be purchased. That's very expensive. Thirdly, the children did not get any help at home because the parents did not speak English. So it was a tough time. We had a real tough time. Fourth one, which I think is also a very important one, is that when you teach through foreign languages, it has a definite impact on culture. And I think a lot of members of the Jamaat felt that there were things happening which were culturally not sound. But on the one hand, the Jamaat wanted English, so they just could not stop that. See, so these were some of the huge problems we had. And I don't think that the problem has been resolved yet. I think we still have problems. I think it takes many generations before a language becomes really ingrained. But I think a good start was made at that time, and inshallah within the next 10-15 years we'll have very high caliber of people who speak and read and write English.
So there were some programs, some teachers had to be relieved from their jobs. Was that program started in your when you were there?
No. I think one very important thing we must remember is that a time comes when if you are changing direction, it will have impact. It will have impact on people who teach. Now those teachers who were willing and were able to cope performed very well. But then there were teachers who had been there in the system for a very long time and who might not have been very enthusiastic about going through this improvement. It became a little bit of a handicap for AKES. Now, you see, it becomes a very difficult decision. Should you ask them to leave? What would they do? What will their families eat? So it was a very difficult decision. And even now, I don't think the problem has been resolved. There are going to be problems, even in the future. For example, as the Jamaat demands better and better quality, the Jamaat will have to make some sacrifices. Now, should the sacrifice be through termination of people? Because who will pay them? There is not unlimited resource. So that is a very sensitive issue. And I think things have not become so bad that there will be problems. But I also feel that we will have to find, not as AKES, not as AKDN, I think as a whole Jamaat, we have to find a solution for that. I think it's a difficult one. I don't think that there is just one right answer. And you can't wait for another 10-15 years because Jamaat wants progress. So we have to find a solution. One solution could have been if all the schools were converted into community schools and the community could have taken a decision. But then you are again shifting the problem from one organization to another organization. So it's not an easy one. We've been very lucky that we've had some huge funding, we meaning AKES, for the last 10 years from the European Commission. A lot of people have benefited out of it. But I'm worried. I think a problem is coming up where when that funding gets over, all the contract teachers and people will have to be relieved. And that can become quite a problem. While people have become used to earning a salary, suddenly if they don't have jobs, there'll be a problem. So this will become a social problem. And I think it's not going to be an easy problem.
So you were talking about this expecting this shifting of schools to community. You just hinted it. How you view that? If that some of the school will be shifted to the community, will that work or?
No, I don't think it will work easily. In fact, this issue was discussed with Hazrat, and he made a comment. He says, initially it might work, but what if the community gets into difficulties? Who will look after those schools? So that's why those schools are still AKES schools. But what we have done, you see, we have not opened any new schools in the last 15 years. But what we have done is that we have encouraged Jamaats to open their own schools with technical support from AKES. So that has happened. And it has, some of the results have been very good. I mean, for example, a lot of the high schools, the upgraded schools, are run as community-based schools, and they have worked very well. I mean, these schools, I remember the school in Nasrabad was upgraded as a community-based school, and the Jamaat was very happy with that. So up to grade 8, up to middle school, it's AKES school, and the grade 9 and 10 is Jamaati school. Now, as a result, what has happened is that Jamaat has become very bold and experienced, and now they are running even higher secondary schools in many of these upgraded schools. So I think Sonikot, I think Danyor, they all have high schools, and these are all privately run, and our girls are getting better and better educated. So, you know, I see that another 15-20 years, things will get better. This is the problem with education. You see, education cannot change overnight. I mean, it requires a lot of resources, it requires a lot of planning, it requires a lot of patience. And we think that we are providing good quality of education to a child in class 1. But it will be only another 20 years before we know whether it was good quality or not. Because it's that time that we'll figure out whether the child was able to get good jobs, good education, did he or she become a leader. It takes time.
Now coming to northern area, so you had been working there as well. So you might have come across some tough time there, and with the Jamaat, dealing with Jamaat while. So have you anything to share with us about that?
Sure. No, you know, I must say I've been very lucky. I have always been able to negotiate. There were difficult times, but the Jamaat never gave me personally a tough time, because I was always prepared to negotiate, to listen, to reason, and they always respected me. So I was never get out, for example. I remember we had a very difficult time in early 90s, when there was a whole issue of salaries. We were told in no uncertain terms by the Imam that you have to de-link from the government. You can pay better than the government, but there will be times when the government might pay better than you. So the teachers will have a choice. If they want to leave, they can leave. And it became a major issue with teachers. But through negotiation, slowly and gradually we were able to convince the teachers. And I remember we had some very difficult discussions in early 93, if I'm not mistaken. But it worked out. I know they had tough times even later on, so it worked very well. Then the other issue that often came up was that of equity. Equity between people who come from Hunza, people who come from Giza. There was always a feeling amongst people who came from Giza that the leaders who came out of Hunza had better opportunities than Giza. But I always tried to explain that I think the issue is education. Get educated and you'll be able to compete better. And mashallah, today, the general manager of northern areas, AKES, is somebody from Giza. And we don't have those problems anymore. I think these things take time. And I really feel that one has to have patience. And for me, mashallah, patience has worked very well. So while I used to have amazing discussions with the members of Jamaat, I did not have any problems, and I always tried my best to convince them that what we were doing was for the betterment of the Jamaat at large. I mean, I had some amazing discussions with members of the Jamaat from Chipursan Valley, from Giza Valley, And it all worked. And by the way, it's not only Hunza Giza problem. We had Chitral northern areas problem, because Chitral has always felt that northern areas was being favored. And Azim was very concerned. He really wanted to make sure that the Jamaat in Chitral got the best possible resources to improve their quality of education. But again, you know, this is something that we tried to resolve through negotiations. And nowadays, when I go to northern areas in Chitral, when I see the progress that the Jamaat has made, it is fantastic in such a short time. I'm sure a lot more could have been done, but you know, there are always limitations of both human resources and financial resources.
Mm. So you were when you were facing these sort of challenge, there were other challenges as well in terms of travel and all, visiting all those areas. So if you have that sort of something to share with us.
Oh yeah, I can. That is something that I can never forget. My first visit to Sherkila was in March of 1989. And you won't believe that it took me 4 hours to reach Sherkila from Gilgit, a journey that now takes 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Because there was no road. We were literally traveling on stones, and you know, it was terrible. Likewise in Chitral, around the same time, it took me about 5.5 hours to go from Chitral town to Buni, a journey which today takes only about 1.25 hours, maybe 1.5 hours. So this all shows the amount of progress that has been made. In those days, we were traveling by jeeps, and I can tell you, by the time we reached the destination, you did not know which bone of your body might break. You see. But we did it. We used to travel all over the place. I was lucky. I was able to go right up to Chipperson Valley, to Sus side, Murkun, on the other side, right up to Funder and Teru, and in Chitral right up to Brep and Meragram. Then of course in early 90s we also had access to the helicopter, which made our lives a little bit better. We could visit many more schools, and that helped enormously. I mean, I was very lucky that I went right up to Yarkun-Lasht in northern Chitral. I went up to Zudkun in Chipperson Valley. I've been to Simshal maybe more than one time, and it gave me first-hand information of the difficulties that the Jamaat was facing, and we planned accordingly. And you know, mashallah, today we have had a number of people from Simshal even at IED, and I remember Mahmoud Khalik. He's now even serving the Jamaat in Afghanistan. So these are the kinds of things which make you feel very proud. Tough times, but thoroughly enjoyable times.
So when you were serving in AKESP, so who were the prominent figures with you working in the area, because that will also help us.
Oh, in those years, in northern areas we had Aga Khan and Sadruddin Pardhan. Sadruddin Pardhan was of course from Karachi, but those two were there. They were in the overall management. And then we had Dawar Shah, we had Samsh.
Shams,
Yeah, and then we had, of course, Moladad, who was up and coming. He was education officer, but our champion in field-based teacher development program. We had Mahmudullah Beg. We had I forget now. Who else was there? No, these are the people I remember immediately. I'm sure I'll remember others. In Chitral we had Liaquat, who held the fort for us. And he did a terrific job. He had one of the most difficult jobs. And then, of course, the volunteers did a very good job. We had Sabzali Panna in Chitral. We had anyways, if I remember, I'll let you know.
So, anything which you remember in a case was the most remarkable, which you think is the most remarkable achievement, as your personal as well as of AKS, and maybe we can go for the other question.
By the time I started, of course, Aga Khan Academy and Sharkila were already in place. But one thing that we tried very hard was to establish Aga Khan Higher Secondary School in Gilgit for boys. And that was, the planning started during my time. And then we also thought that maybe we should look at Gakuch, although Gakuch did not come during my time as the CEO, but then by then I was, by the time Gakuch came on board, I was on the board. And I'll tell you about that a little later. The other achievement, I think, was I thought it was very important to expose our leadership in northern areas, particularly in education, to not only Karachi, but to take them overseas, just for them to see what education can do and what is possible. So during my time, I think we sent about 35 or 36 people from northern areas in Chitral to visit England, to visit other foreign countries, to see how we can progress, to see what we can do with education. And I think that really helped to improve their outlook. And I think these are some of the things that we did. I have always believed that we must invest in people. And of course, while I was at AKES, this is what we tried to do, but once I left AKES, I joined IED. And once IED came into being, I think the number of teacher educators that we developed both in northern areas and Chitral is phenomenal. Through the IED programs, we have developed something like 80 or 85 MEDs across northern areas and about 40-45 in Chitral. And I think this is going to have a huge impact for the future of education in northern areas. Although many of them are no longer in northern areas, they are working in areas like Mansehra and Kashmir. But I think that's temporary. I think at heart they really want to serve the Jamaat in northern areas. And inshallah, one of these days they'll go back and really serve the Jamaat. As I said, I really believe in human resources. I also feel that the northern areas has been very lucky that in the last 10 years, northern areas has produced at least 4 PhDs through AKUID programs from overseas, and then there are 4 more in the pipeline through AKUID's PhD program. And likewise in Chitral also we have produced PhDs. And more people from northern areas in Chitral are now going overseas for education. For me, that is an absolutely wonderful thing that has happened.
You were talking that you will be talking about this Gakuch Higher Secondary School later.
Yeah, I mean, I think I already said it. I think somebody should someday write a story about how that land in Gakuch was transformed into such a fantastic site that the school today, and the school construction had no problems. And I think if not for the Jamaati efforts, that land could never have been transformed like that. When we acquired that land during the days when I was the CEO, I just wondered how we would ever be able to build a school there, because it was absolutely stony and very rough. And once after Azimam's visit to Gakuj, I went to see that land. I couldn't recognize it because the Jamaat had done a fantastic job of filling it up. And I think our children in Gakuj are very lucky that they got such a fantastic school. And I think that school is also going to perform very well. It has its difficulties, but I think it is on the right track. Yeah.
So there were also some there might be some points that where you might have felt that had I done this, I would have been in a better position. Is there any feeling that you have in some area, in one area, or in one aspect or in the other, there is a feeling that, oh, I have less achieved in that way, as a AKESP CEO?
Oh, I mean, I could enumerate a lot of them, particularly if we had the financial resources available. But I think with the resources available, I feel very satisfied that we really tried our best. We did our best to work with the Jamaat to get the results that we got. No, I just can't immediately think of anything because remember, I was CEO only for 5 years, and I've very good feelings, very good memories about that. I tried my best to help as many people as is possible. I often used to discuss this with my board member Raza Beg, and we felt that we could do a lot more, but you see, education takes time. And girls who went to the Aga Khan Academy in early 90s are now coming into leadership role. One of them works right here in the director's office, and I was quite amazed that she was a student at the Aga Khan Academy when I was the CEO, and over a period of time she has risen to be a very good person. So no, there's nothing that I can think of during my time as CEO which I would have done differently. I think we were lucky, and things just moved very well for us. And we were in so much of developmental mode that we didn't even have time to think. I mean, things were happening. One day we had the Buni Girls Hostel being constructed, then we had the Chitral Boys Hostel being constructed. We were planning for the higher secondary school. There was a lot of pressure from the Jamaat. And then Gakuj came along. So, we were always doing something new, you see. So we didn't even have time to think what more we could have done. So it's been a very satisfying experience.
So, when did you then join this IED? Immediately after that case, or?
Yes. In fact, I was attending the 1993 budget meeting, which was held in December 1992 at Eglemo. And we made a presentation about IED to Hazrimam. And that day Hazrimam wondered if I was going to join IED, and I said yes, if the opportunity came up, I would definitely join IED. And my contract was coming to an end on 30th June 1993 at AKES. And the day after I joined IED. So for a period of time I was working jointly. Remember when IED was being planned, I was the CEO of AKES. And I was a member of the team that planned the IED. So it was quite easy for me to just move over. And so since 1st July 1993, I've been with IED. Although technically I started with IED on 1st April 1993, when I was working part-time at IED, part-time at AKES.
So this IED was initially part of AKES, or?
No. But it resulted out of the work of AKES, not only in Pakistan, but internationally. Because, you see, a lot of initiatives were made in East Africa, in Pakistan, in India, by AKES's and Aga Khan Foundation through school improvement programs. And a number of things that came up as a result was that the teachers felt that they would like to have credible certification. Number two was that we wanted a permanent base from where school improvement can be initiated. And you see, within AKDN we did not have any teacher education institution. So Azimam was very keen that something came up, and as a result of our discussion in the task force, we recommended that we should have an in-service teacher education program which will look into education and not only look at teacher education, but also conduct research into what works and what does not work. So Azimam was very keen on that, and that's how ID came into being. So really speaking, and that's why when I was at AKES, I was looking into how AKES's work can inform us about what kind of a teacher education institution was. Because we ourselves had a school improvement program here in Karachi. We had field-based teacher development program in northern areas. We had self-help schools construction program. So all that had taught us a lot of lessons. And that's how we developed the proposal for IED. So yes, I joined IED immediately after my time at AKES.
I had noticed the board, PDCN board in Gilgit, where it was, and the part of it was written AKES and AKU and then PDCN. So people were saying that it was initially, it's just for, that's why I asked the question, because I was not aware of this. And many people don't know, that's why. That there is a unit also, academic development unit in the building, which is still owned by the AKES, and the rest of the buildings are of PDCN, which belongs to AKUID, definitely.
But do you want to know why?
Yeah.
In 1995, our board, AKU board, asked us to conduct a feasibility study of a possible professional development center in northern areas. So I was asked to take charge of that, and we did a study and we wrote a report. And we recommended the establishment of a professional development center in North, which would cater to both northern areas and Chitral. So the report was ready and it went to the board, and the board said that we like the report, but we feel that you as AKUID should be invited to assist in this establishment of that, so another organization should set it up. So we were a little surprised, but we said fine. And at that time, Aziz Karim Bhai was the chairman of AKES. He was also on the board, And he said he would talk to the AKES board and see if they were willing to set it up. So AKES board then decided to do that. At that time we were putting in a large bid to European Commission for quality improvement of education. One of the components was establishment of PDC. So technically PDC was established by AKES, but that's where it ended. IED was supposed to be running it. Right? So that's why AKES is then still appears there. It was just a technical difference. And but it created some difficulties because who would be the ultimate decision-making authority? And by year 2000, Azimam had very clearly mentioned that IED should be the decision-making authority. But AKES has benefited enormously from PDCN. A very large number of master's graduates in northern areas have come through the AKES system.
So again, we will come to Pakistan and then the honorary setup in which you have been working while being in Pakistan.
Okay.
So
when I left AKES on 30th June 1993, I was fortunate to be appointed by Azimam on the AKES board. So on 11th July 1993, I became a board member. So from being a CEO, now I moved to being a board member. And that's the period during which we got this funding from European Commission. And I was lucky that I was reappointed. So I served my 2 full terms. And I mean, I enjoyed it because having been the CEO, I had a lot of information about how the organization functions. And then for 6 years I was the board member. So there was continuity, and for me it was a very exciting period, but sometimes very challenging, because I had to be very careful not to start looking for faults of some of my ex-colleagues, because it can easily be done. And I just tried my best to function as a board member as part of governance and not as part of management. And it was very exciting. So at the end of my 2 terms with AKES, again I was fortunate to be appointed by Azimam as a member of the National Tariqa Board. So I served 2 terms there. So for me, those 12 years serving on various boards were absolutely fascinating to see how education board functions and how Tariqa board functions. Then they are very different, because education board functions more and more like a corporate board, whereas in Tariqa board we are really hands-on, so the board members also play a role as management. These are 2 very different styles of working. But that's because the 2 organizations are very different. One is an almost totally voluntary organization, which is Tariqa Board, and AKES is by and large a large corporation type of an organization with different kind of governance.
So I am afraid we will need to stop it, because
that's okay.
This will be wonderful, sir.
But I need a copy of this.
You will get a copy of this.
That's fine.
So, thank you so very much for your fruitful discussion and your sharing of information. This will assist us in knowing some of the aspects of the history. It will also enable us to fill in the gaps while writing my personal work. So it's a great generosity of yours.
Yes.
Give me time. So
It's a pleasure.
I will also try to see, because when I will be transcribing, I will come across some areas. Then I will manage your help.
Oh,
So,
no problems. No, and there are a lot of things that I'm sure I missed out, which I would have loved to talk about. But
okay.
you know, yeah, sure, we can
Thank
fill
you.
up the gaps. Yeah.